Great, thank you. So hello everyone, I am Ann Bradford. I am the chair of Wellbeing Week in Law and the organizer of the after party. And I'm also the vice president of the new nonprofit, the Institute for Wellbeing in Law, which we call I Will. And the after party is an event of I Will and sponsored by the Professional Development Consortium. And I want to welcome you to today's session called the Mindful Business Charter, Committing to Wellbeing in the Attorney-Client Relationship. And making real progress in workplace well-being will be difficult if the attorney-client relationship doesn't really become a focus of discussion in the ways that it can support or undermine well-being on both sides of the relationship. So fortunately, we have a fantastic panel today to talk about the charter, which identifies very specific behaviors that in-house lawyers and their outside lawyers commit to support each other's well-being. And our moderator today is going to be Richard Martin, who's a former practicing lawyer himself, and the Director of Mental Health and Wellbeing at Berndean in London. So Richard, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Anne, and thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to be with you and to share some thoughts around the Mindful Business Charter, so welcome. As Anne said, I'm Richard Martin. I used to be a lawyer, used to be a partner of Jones Day and then at a London firm, and I got to kind of change track because I had some big mental health problems myself in 2011, and that led me to be in hospital and to change career a little bit. And at Berndean, we do all sorts of work with organisations around their culture, but one of the things we're most proud of is the work that we do in promoting and developing the Mindful Business Charter. So what have we got planned for the next hour or so? Well, first of all, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to what the Charter is about. And as Anne said, it's all about the relationship between clients and suppliers, in this case, law firms. And so we're going to be hearing from some people who actually implement this stuff and do it as part of their job. So Jonathan Hoey, who is a partner in the London office of TLT, and he's going to be talking about implementing the charter there and also engaging with clients. Adam Farlow, who's a partner in the London office of Baker McKenzie, and he's going to be talking about their perspective and their journey. So two law firm perspectives. And then we're going to hear from Julie Smith and Lashante Robertson, who are from Barclays. Julie's general counsel, Lashante is a VP in documentation, and they're going to be looking at it from the client perspective. And hopefully what you'll get out of today is some interest and enthusiasm for perhaps finding out more or even getting involved, and then we can have a think about how that might happen. We'll have time at the end for Q&A. As Anne said in the chat, we welcome questions as we go through in the chat function, but also when we get to the end of the session of the speakers part, so we can obviously open up microphones and things like that, and people can just ask questions. So that's the plan. A little bit of introduction then from me in terms of what the Charter is about. Starting point is this, that when we're stressed, our brains don't work very well. And that's not good for us as individuals. Stress isn't healthy for us. But it's also not very good for the quality of our work. If our brains aren't working very well, then we're not able to do the kind of complicated, complex, and important work that lawyers are often involved with. So it's not good for us, but it's also not good for the organizations we work for, the clients we work for. And some of the stress that we experience comes from our own heads, but some of it comes from the way in which we work with each other, the way in which we interact within our organizations, but also between our organizations. Most of us are pretty well intentioned. Most of us don't intend to cause each other stress, but we do, and then we don't talk about it. And what the Mindful Business Charter does is to say, hey, let's try and be a little bit more aware of the impact that we're having upon each other. And let's give each other the permission to talk about it. Because if we do those two things, then we might be able to identify the unnecessary causes of stress in the way in which we work, remove them, and create both healthier and more effective ways of working. So that's basically where the Charter comes from. And it was the brainchild of lawyers in the in-house team at Barclays in London and a couple of their panel law firms, Pinsent Masons and Littleshaw Goddard. And they had all done quite a lot of work around kind of mental health awareness in the workplace, lots of training and other things. But there was this elephant in the room that said, yeah, but the way we work is not helping. And Barclays were very clear from the outset that they understood that in the context of that attorney-client relationship that Anne was talking about, they, Barclays, have an awful lot of power. lawyers, we tend to be a little bit shy, not very good at putting ourselves forward, at making requests, asserting our needs. And Barclays were very aware that, hey, aware that when they gently cleared their throat, their lawyers started jumping, and they carried on jumping until they fell over exhausted. And that wasn't what anybody wanted. And so there was a big part of these initial discussions that was saying, Barclays saying, please help us create a way of working with each other so that that doesn't happen. Now, being lawyers, the initial instinct was to create a big rule book, but then recognizing that actually that wouldn't be helpful. And so what they set about doing was to create something that was very simple, that everybody could look at and say, yeah, that works, that makes sense. And that was adaptable and adoptable, whatever you were doing, whatever your context and wherever you were in terms of a kind of a journey on mental health in the workplace. So identified 4 pillars, and we're just going to look briefly at what those 4 pillars are. First pillar is around openness and respect, and this is critical. What this is about is 2 things. First of all, respect that says I care about the impact that I have on other people. I care about the well-being of the fellow professionals that I work with within my organization, but also in other organizations, first of all. And secondly, I want to have the conversation. I want to have that relationship with people, with the people I work with, so that we can put this on the agenda. And we can have it on the agenda when we first begin working with each other, during a piece of work, and at the end. And because I know that my client is on board, I can be brave. I can challenge, I can push back. If I don't know the client is on board, because I'm a lawyer, because I'm a bit shy, because I'm a bit wary, I don't have that courage. The Charter is a permissive framework that gives people that permission to put their hand up and say what they need. So the starting point, first pillar, openness and respect. And I've seen extraordinary developments in terms of the relationships that clients and attorneys have with each other as a result of the conversations they're having around the Charter. Second pillar is much more granular, and it says, look, let's look at some key parts of the way in which we work. So the way we communicate, meetings and emails. Let's only have meetings that we need to have. We can spend all sorts of amounts of the time wrapped up in meetings that are just a little bit pointless and a little bit stressful. Let's only have meetings that we need to have. Let's make them as short as possible. Let's only invite people who need to be there. Let's have an agenda and let's stick to it. Let's allow people to join in the most appropriate way. Let's be mindful of the timing of meetings. Let's not have meetings at lunchtime so that people can get out and get some fresh air and do other things. Let's be mindful of the fact that, yeah, some of our colleagues are in different parts of the world and they do have different time zones, and that's going to have an impact. And let's not cancel meetings at the last moment if we can avoid it, because, hey, that's just wasting everybody's time. So being more thoughtful, more mindful about meetings. And obviously, we've seen with the last 15 months that, hey, we can do most of our meetings over Zoom. And that's a lot less stressful for a lot of people than having to travel to meeting rooms and all that kind of stuff. So allowing people to join meetings in the way that is most effective, most appropriate for them. And with our emails, we all know that we can get overwhelmed with the volume of email that traffic goes on. Let's just be more thoughtful about it. Do I need to send this email? Do I need to copy in 50 people? Just because I can, it doesn't mean I should. So let's be thoughtful about that. Let's be mindful of when we're sending emails. So it might suit me to be working on a Sunday afternoon, getting rid of the emails in my inbox, but what's the impact on everybody else that's receiving those emails on a Sunday afternoon? So thinking about that, being more mindful of that. Third pillar is around respecting rest periods. That should be rest periods rather than just respecting periods. Sorry. And it's kind of what it says on the tin, that giving people the opportunity to put some boundaries. I'll give you an example of this. So the attorneys at Lloyds Bank a couple of years back made a big point on their summer holidays. They said, we are not taking our work phones on holiday. And that felt like a really dramatic thing for them to be doing. They said, look, of course, we'll have our personal phones with us. And if you need us, you can get hold of us, but we will not be looking at our emails as a matter of course. If you need us, you can phone us. But it just meant that people had to stop and think a little bit more before they bothered them, so that people had a better quality of holiday. And they also gave a really strong example to everybody else to say, you can do this too. Giving people the opportunity to just have the rest periods that we know we need. Sometimes we will have to work hard. Sometimes we will have to work in the evenings and at the weekends and even on holiday. But let's make that more the exception than the rule. Final pillar is around what this looks like internally, so mindful delegation. And there's lots that could be said here, but basically this is about enabling people within our organizations to have that open conversation with each other and agree, what do we expect from each other in terms of the way we're working? So that's, in a very quick run round, what the Charter is about. As I say, that permissive framework that enables people to make small changes. And this isn't about revolution. It isn't about saying we've got to change everything that we've done. It's about small steps. It's about thinking, okay, what can we do that would make a material difference to my life, to your life, today, tomorrow? What can we do? Small steps. And it began in October 2018 with 3 banks and 9 law firms. And now we've got 80 signatories. And as you'll see, it's a mix of organizations, but they're not small organizations. They're not suckers. These are big, serious, hard-working organizations. Barclays, Goldman Sachs, Clifford Chance, Freshfields, TLT, Baker McKenzie. These are big, serious organizations. And so this is not about people not wanting to work hard or not doing a good job. This is about how do we do what we need to do in the healthiest and most effective way. So that's all I'm going to say for the moment on what the Charter is. We'll probably touch on more as we go through. What I'm going to do now is hand over to Jonathan Hoey from TLT, who is going to talk from a perspective of TLT, both in terms of what they've done internally to implement it, but also engaging with clients. So Jonathan, over to you.
Thanks very much, Richard. Hello, everyone, and welcome. TLT, many of you may not have heard of TLT before, but just briefly, it's a 120 partner practice based in the UK with international alliances, but we specialize in a number of industries, but most notably the financial services, retail and leisure, clean energy, public sector and digital sectors. So MBC, our journey. Well, we signed up in October 2019 on World Mental Health Day. And from the word go, we made sure there was senior management validation to the firm. The board endorsed the charter, and we set up a working group of all levels of people in the firm to come up with some quick wins, what Richard was talking about sort of early on, with small steps. And that's so important because, we can all write loads and loads of policy documents which never see the light of day, and they get filed away and everyone ticks a box and says, I've achieved that. But what we wanted to do was let's try and get some kind of quick wins. And we started off with smart meetings and email best practice. So smart meetings are things that are really straightforward, sort of the circulation of the agenda in good time, having timings against each element of the agenda, inclusive topics, revolving chairs, so we have a variety of presenters to give everyone a voice, firm start time, firm finish time. And I know that might just seem like just normal best practice, but what that really is it's enabling people to make the best use of their time, and time is limited, right? We all get that. And so the point is we're valuing other people's time, and people really take a lot from that you're thinking of them, and it made a huge difference. So we now have really, really strict meetings, whereas before they were, if I'm being totally honest, a bit lazy. And so then some best practices were developed around emails, clear emails, really controlled emails. We act for a number of very large banks, and they all tell us, please, when you give us advice, use the no scroll rule. We want to look at it on one page. We don't want to keep going through pages and pages. Concise, succinct, executive summaries, that sort of thing. Well, let's treat ourselves internally like that as well, by having clear headings. Mark them urgent if they really are urgent, but don't if they're not. Or, as Richard was saying about that Sunday afternoon clear out, put in that very clearly, you do not need to read this now, because if people are by quirk of fate opening up emails on Sunday afternoon, you need to make it clear you don't expect them to deal with it then. I'm considering who needs to be on the email chain, because the email chains grow and grow, don't they? But taking a bit of a step back and recalibrating. So what we were doing was tightening up sort of some quite, ill-considered approaches to how we deal with each other. And one of the big things that we also introduced in terms of respecting rest periods were the fact not of just taking laptops and phones on holiday, which we have positively discouraged and looked down upon if people do it nevertheless. As long as there's a route to connect somebody through their personal mobile by their PA or whatever, that's fine. But the other thing was actually getting people to take their holiday, which is another issue, particularly as we've seen in the pandemic, people working ridiculous hours very often and not taking holidays. So we've introduced some policies around that. And indeed, the pandemic has accelerated our adoption of MBC principles in terms of our education and awareness. So, for example, now the 4 pillars are embedded in our management development program. So all managers now have these 4 pillars embedded in not only what we expect of them, but evidence as to how they're adopting it. So it gets a clear flag in their appraisal, which links in to how they're remunerated, for example. So you really link it back through the whole process. And I think that what we have found through with all these things is that we had a push scenario. We were pushing the pillars to our people. Now it's almost a pull in terms of our demand, because what that means is the enthusiasm is such that lots and lots of different groups have gone off and developed their own strategies, their own connections to the MBC pillars. And now our biggest challenge is actually to get the coordination and consistency. We're trying to pull it all together. It's like something that's got a bit out of control, and we're now trying to bring it all back into the center and say, okay, let's now have some consistency across all the great things that people are doing through sheer enthusiasm and because it's working, and people feel better about themselves and better about how they're working with each other. So that's the only thing I'd say is that's one of our big mistakes. We didn't give an eye on how fast it was moving. In terms of clients, a number of our clients are already signatories to the MBC, which makes life a lot easier, because then when we have it as agenda items on each of our relationship meetings, we in advance get some examples about good things that have happened and not so good things that have happened. And we will share examples. So we were doing one deal recently where somebody had a particular working pattern where they would effectively fire off emails from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. and they wanted stuff coming back, whereas a lot of the people in my team weren't working those hours. And we had a few issues that came about as a result of that, and it was all about real clear communication and taking a step back and really talking it through to say, okay, if that's the time that person can only send emails due to personal circumstances, let's at least get the expectation right about when the reply is going to come in. And I think that it was, again, being mindful of everyone's situation, because we've all got very different situations, and they all need to be recognized and understood so that we can work together really well and to the best of our ability. So I think that what we do now with clients is we have this as the standing agenda item. We call out good things, call out not so good things, and we then work out action plans around it. Because the Mindful Business Charter is at its core essentially a simple set of guidelines. It's malleable and it's flexible to the personality of the organization. You can use it in so many different ways, but the ethos is what's important. And I think that what we have found with clients who are not yet signatories, they're now asking us about it. They're asking us about what our experience is. And what we do is we don't just wheel out partners to go and see these clients. We'll get all levels of colleagues to come and speak to them and tell them what a difference it's made in terms of how effective they are at working. So what have we found overall is a happier workforce, a more productive workforce, and people getting along better. But also, really importantly, is that connection with the client is more honest, more open, and it's given us a platform on which to challenge constructively and have a really, really good dialogue, which allows for the creation of better working practices between us. So there is a real business edge to this, which is spun out of concern for each other, but actually its tentacles reach out far and wide in ways that we probably fully haven't imagined yet. So we are still on this journey. It's still evolving, and it will continue to evolve for a number of years, I'm sure. But I can heartily recommend looking at it and seeing how it could best work for you in your organization and also in the organizations that you deal with. And that's all from me. I hope that was okay.
Thank you, Jonathan. That's lovely. And that sense of journey, absolutely. I don't think anybody would say that we've got this fixed. This is all about what we're doing and what the change we can make as we go through. So thank you so much. And I know there will be questions as we go through, so stay with us. I'm going to hand over to Adam Farlow, who is a partner in the Baker McKenzie London office. And Adam's going to be sharing Baker's experience and journey.
Great. Thanks so much. And I loved hearing, Jonathan, we're also on a journey. And looking at it through similar lenses. We were much slower to start than he was. So some questions around consistency and the like are going to pop up in what I speak about, because we work in an industry that can and does break people, and I and my colleagues take that very seriously. The MBC is part of our overall well-being efforts, and it's an important part because of the practical commitments that are associated with it. It's interesting, so much of it, and there's some that's not, but so much of it is sort of mom and apple pie. It's pretty hard to argue with having emails that have the right subject lines and are sent to the right people, and that meetings don't run longer than they need to. It's pretty difficult to argue against any of those. So lots of the things there are actually just stuff that normal people in any environment ought to be doing. There are some things that are more difficult, perhaps in our industry, probably in others. And there's a journey associated with that. Culture change, and it is culture change, is not easy. It takes some time to embed, and it doesn't happen overnight. I would really encourage anyone who's looking at signing the charter to start right at the introductory couple of sentences, which says exactly what I've just said. It does take time. It doesn't happen overnight, and these are practical commitments that are doable. We were one of the early signatories in 2018. We signed it on a Thursday, and I'll always remember that it was a Thursday because about 24 hours later on a Friday evening, one of my corporate partners, who sits just a short walk from me, sent around an email to a bunch of juniors at 5 o'clock on a Friday night, suggesting that he was unhappy that he had been unable to find some volunteers to do some things that evening. And actually having signed the MBC just so almost immediately beforehand, did throw open the question of hypocrisy. We had to be very careful about that in the context of our people. But as Jonathan said, it was a great platform to be able to have that discussion. I would have been speaking sort of out of thin air or maybe a bit of common sense, but I actually had a piece of paper that I could say, this is not what we're doing anymore. And that was very important in terms of starting the process to really embed this. Jonathan mentioned the question of consistency and quick wins. I was very frustrated. We had no early quick wins. We spent forever trying to get everything right before we properly rolled it out. I would urge people to try and pick some quick wins. We were all around consistency. How do we get this embedded on all 8 floors of our building rather than team by team? So we started there, and now we've worked towards localization. In the context of consistency, I think that's both a question of tone at the top, having the managing partner say that this is important, having department managers say that this is important, and then having everybody with any sort of authority over anybody say that this is important. In the context of localization, making it part of everyday conversations, team meetings, that we cover this, that it's on the agenda, and that we're intentional about having that. And it's it's raised interesting questions around things that nobody just nobody had those conversations around previously. So I had never once before signing the MBC ever produced a set of handover notes, turned on and out of office. I was available. That was the expectation. We now have a culture that's not completely changed from that. But if you've booked holiday, and we encourage people to book holiday, a couple of days beforehand, you get an email saying, don't forget you're booked to be off Thursday and Friday. Here is the link to the form of handover note that you should have in place before you leave, so that it encourages people to think about that in advance, get in place rather than just agreeing to take whatever phone calls come in. And here's a couple of great examples of out of office messages that you should include. So it encourages people, it gives people the sense that they should be turning on their out of office, that they should be handing over when they're out of the office. And that's a question that young people have. Is it something that is okay for me to do? I've not seen anybody else do it. Getting the message that it is for them too is super important, and I think it has made a difference. We have not cracked this. There are certainly areas where we still have a lot of work to do. To call out a couple, we are not as brave as we ought to be in our conversations with clients. I think we've gotten really good at the internal discussions. We're not yet as good as we need to be in discussions with clients, and we do need to be braver around that. And I'm super happy to be followed by an important client in just a moment where you can get their perspective on it. But that piece around being honest with our clients as well as internally is important. I think, like everybody, the always on culture that has particularly enveloped us over the course of the last year, where many of us still sleep next to our office in a way that perhaps wasn't true previously. And I do think, and I'll wrap up with this, I think we're not as great as we need to be at example setting. One of the things that I struggle with, that Sunday afternoon clear out that Richard mentioned, I take it personally when I get emails on weekends. There's no way that I cannot think about an email that I see in my inbox. And so the only way that I can react to that to help move the dial is for me to not send those emails. For me personally, I will often draft them up and file them in our drafts folder. And I can hit those on Monday at a reasonable time. And then that way I know that people aren't spending all Sunday afternoon wondering whether I really mean that I don't mean for them to respond or think about that. But that is, as a general rule, a struggle for me and for many people around the office, that it's just easier to clear out that inbox rather than to leave it to a normal time. But I think overall, the dial moving that has occurred as a result of being caught up with the Mindful Business Charter has made it absolutely worth doing. And I'd encourage anybody to reach out to anybody involved in this panel, to me personally, to chat about any questions they have about making it work for them.
Thank you, Adam. That's fantastic.
Right.
And just as an example from somewhere else of something Adam was saying there. So I was talking to a fairly senior partner at Alan Overy relatively recently, who said, yeah, I used to have this, I was very mindful about my Sunday afternoon emails. And so what I would do is I would use the delay function on Outlook, so that I would send all the emails out on a Sunday afternoon, but I'd have a delay thing that said, don't actually deliver this until 9 o'clock on Monday morning. And then she said, yeah, and then one of my team was really brave and came up to me one day and said, I know you're trying to be helpful, but we all hate Monday mornings. The first thing that happens is you just get deluged with all of your Sunday afternoon. And again, that's just the thing about, okay, let's have the permission to talk about it. Yeah,
it's a conversation.
And I'll give you one other example on a bigger scale of that. So I was talking to a large US investment bank, their in-house attorneys, about the Mindful Business Charter. And one of the things about the charter is that we encourage signatories to get other people involved. The more people are involved, the bigger the difference we can make. So, and she was talking to me about, this lawyer was talking, this attorney was talking to me about how they were interested in it. And she said, it's really interesting because I've got 10 panel law firms that I work with on a daily basis who are MBC signatories who have not mentioned this to us. And we are really interested in it. We want to work in this way, but the law firms are not being brave enough to ask us about it. And so as a lesson in how we can be braver, I think it's a really nice one, which is obviously a beautiful segue to Julie and Lashante from Barclays, who are going to talk about their perspective. So over to Julie first, who is General Counsel.
Hi, so I'm Julie Smith. I'm General Counsel of our U.S. broker-dealer, Barclays Capital Inc. I also head up a team that advises the U.S. businesses on bank regulation, our internal treasury function, and U.S. M&A. And we're here to give the client perspective about the impact of the Mindful Business Charter and what impact that can have within an organization, and why we find it valuable for our law firms to have the cultural shift that occurs through adoption of the Mindful Business Charter. I had planned on talking about my own cultural journey from starting off at Big Law into Barclays' transformed culture as a result of the Mindful Business Charter. I don't think that I think that everyone here has probably gotten a sense of the heightened humanity that exists in the workplace once an organization has adopted the Mindful Business Charter. So I think I will skip that part and I'll move on. The two other things I wanted to talk about were how Barclays rolled out the Mindful Business Charter, which is different from the two examples you've already heard, and concrete examples that I've seen of the benefits of adopting the Mindful Business Charter. So the way it got promoted by Barclays, it was rolled out in 2018. I was not one of the organizers of it. I was a participant in a global town hall of about 800 lawyers and non-lawyer professionals that make up our global legal department. And our global general counsel announced that we had started this initiative, put the 4 pillars on a PowerPoint, and described them. And I think everyone in the virtual room and physical room felt that they, as Adam said, they intuitively make sense, right? Maybe smart meetings and smart evils make more intuitive sense than respecting people's rest periods, which, as if you're in a 24/7 culture and you've been raised as a lawyer to be on call all the time, respecting people's rest periods may initially sound counterintuitive, but then, as Richard had said at the beginning, people realize that when you allow people to be fully human and you allow them to have their rest periods, they will bring their best thoughts toward an issue. So in any case, I think everyone in the room immediately thought it made sense. What left the room, I know I left the room making commitments to myself that I would respect people's rest periods, because that was something that was new to me in the room. What really made a difference was the repetition. So we did not have a detailed rollout of decks that people had to present at team meetings and whatnot. What we had was, every time we had a global town hall and every time we would have senior leaders talking within legal, they were asked a question or they started a question talking about the progress of the Mindful Business Charter. So it immediately became, it gave people a license to assert their own individual needs. So I'll move on to what Barclays looks like post Mindful Business Charter. I've been at Barclays 12 years. When I started, we were a very London-driven culture, and I remember having meetings on July 4th when folks in London forgot that it was a holiday in the U.S. So you would have 5:30 a.m. meetings called, and I was I would jump on the 5:30 a.m. meetings because I'm here to serve. After the Mindful Business Charter was rolled out, it became a normal course at Barclays that it was expected that you would have region-friendly business hours. And if someone invites you to a 5:30 a.m. meeting, you immediately respond, can we do this at US friendly hours? And you immediately get an apology. I'll say in terms of impact with external counsel, I've made it a real point to not ask for weekend work when we don't need weekend work, and to respect the rest periods. And I think that has deepened the relationships with external counsel. We in my area, we hire external counsel where we really want creative thought, and we want our counsel to identify with us and give us their best advice. Not just what does the law say, but considering everything, giving us the commercial advice, the advice on risk, and we really want, and for that, relationships are really important. So I feel that I get better legal advice when I have a more fulsome relationship with my external counsel, and being able to talk about what reasonable expectations are, what reasonable expectations for deliverables are, and what appropriate times are for those deliverables add to that. So I think that's all I'll say for now. I'm going to turn this over to LaShante, who is one of our Mindful Business champions, and she's going to talk about what Barclays has been doing and how Mindful Business Charter has progressed at Barclays. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. So my name is LaShante Robertson, and I'm a Mindful Business Charter champion. So you might be wondering what that is. That was one of the things that Barclays came up with after the meeting that Julie just spoke about, that allowed us to introduce the Mindful Business Charter to the legal department. And basically, what is a Mindful Business Charter champion? Well, I'm basically a cheerleader. In every meeting, in emails, and daily communication, I present the charter. I present the 4 pillars of the charter. I basically make sure that people know that they have the right to speak up about being open about their personal time, and being open about the communications that we give and receive. So, as Julie stated, the messaging started from the top. We immediately started with the boots on the ground, which is the Mindful Business Charter champions, myself, and there's others that are within different areas of our departments. I currently manage a team. So as in managing a team, I encourage from my team, and my team ripples out as well and encourages from their partners and our law firm partners. Okay, so what does that look like in daily practice? As Adam said, as Julie said, it's basically making sure that your communications are clear and succinct. Internally, we use delayed sending to make sure that emails are not sent when they don't need to be. Meetings are held at a reasonable time, and in a reasonable time, we have a set agenda where we can go through all of the points that we need to actually cover in the meeting. That we also make sure that we send emails that don't say all urgent, or that we prioritize our matters. And that also goes for our external law firm partners. Realistic deadlines. If you need something urgently, let them know that it's urgent. But where you don't need it urgently, let them know it's okay to respond on Monday, or it's okay to respond, in this amount of time. Clear subject lines. Obviously, like we all spoke about, most of these things seem like common sense, but it has to be repetitive. And that's where the Mindful Business Charter champions come in. We make sure that it is repetitive, that we say, have you considered, the deadline? Have you considered the timeline on this? In addition to that, making sure that we give people their rest periods. on my team in particular, we make sure that we have handoff memos that we say, these are the items that may come up during my time off. Sending out the emails that say, I'm on holiday between this time and this time, and someone else is going to cover for me, and leaving that person with a clear guideline as to where they are to take a matter. We expect that from our law firm partners as well. No one wants to be on the other side thinking, someone's on holiday and I'm not going to get a response. But we also want to know that we are really building a relationship with our partners. We want to make sure that our partners understand that we are people, we are human. So what we are expecting when we communicate with our external counsel is to make sure that they also communicate back to us, that they tell us, well, this is the person that's going to be covering because I'm on rest period, or I won't be answering emails between this time and this time. And that gives us a clear indication of when we can expect a reply. Again, you may be asking, why do all of this? Well, we're all in the business of relationship building. We want to make sure that we build the relationship with our external partners and our internal partners that benefits both of us. Building great relationships is part of our internal respect, external respect. We want to make sure that we're open and honest with each other, and ultimately we'll meet our deadlines and we will meet what we need to meet in order for us to proceed together in a relationship. So I think that's my time. Again, there's little things that you can do. The small changes make for a very big change. There's things that we've done that has always served us well, but in general, I think just give it a thought before you hit send on that email. Do I need to send this in an email? Can I make a phone call? Does this have to be an email that's an arm's length? Could this be an email and maybe a follow-up phone call so that you can explain a little bit better? Don't send an email where a phone call would suffice. And I think that pretty much covers it. So I'll leave time for us to have a discussion on it. So I'll turn it back over to Richard.
Thank you, LaShante, and thank you, Julie. And Julie, there's a reason why we in London don't really pay much attention to the 4th of July. Just putting it out there. Fantastic, thank you, and thank you to all of you. So, and I'm just picking up a couple of questions in the chat as we've gone through, and I'll just pick up a couple. So, one of the things that I am privileged to do is to go into rooms, or used to, I suppose, before the COVID, and talk to people. And about 2 years ago now, I went into the offices of Clifford Chance in London, where the senior folk from Barclays legal team were there for an offsite. And they wanted some training around kind of mental health awareness, and I thought that's what I do. So I was in there doing that with them. But also they had a number of the senior folk from Clifford Chance, because hey, if the senior folk from Barclays were going to be in their building, Clifford Chance were going to roll out their senior folk too. And so I was a little bit scared, I have to say, because there were lots of important people in the room. Anyway, after about an hour, I had this really strong sense of the extraordinarily close relationship between the folk at Barclays and the folk at Clifford Chance. And it was something that I had not experienced in 20 years being an attorney. So I'd been a partner at Jones Day, I'd been a partner elsewhere. I had not experienced anything like this. And so I said, look, I can't help noticing this. This relationship is extraordinary. Has it always been like this? And they said, absolutely not. This is because we talk to each other now as human beings, because of the Mindful Business Charter. We say things like, I cannot give you this. I won't be able to do a call at 6 o'clock because I'm picking up my children from school. I'll speak to you later on. Of course I will. But, things like that just make that kind of human relationship. So, let's just pick up. Question to Jonathan or Adam, but perhaps to both of you. What was the initial response when the charter was launched in your firms? Jonathan.
Shall I go first? And then they might be very different. I don't know, but I think that it was like a bit of a release valve. I think people, because we gave senior endorsements from the board, wanting this to be integrated into our working practices, but then creating a working group at all levels to come up with something and give them a very quick deadline. We've had a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of openness about how we should move forward with it, and so the reaction was extremely positive and enthusiastic, because I think it's something they've been waiting for. It was a bit what Richard said earlier, that permission. It's okay to say something about something that's not particularly mindful of other people. And law firms can be fairly scary places in many ways, and driven by some very hard metrics, and people would put up with a lot. And what we're trying to do is say, well, that's not good. Let's do it this way, and actually this way will make you even better lawyers, more productive in any event, and we'll all be happier. So what's not to like? So there was a lot of enthusiasm, and as I say, it was almost like people have been waiting for the permission to be given to them in this sort of structure.
Not terribly different. I think we spent a fair amount of, not a huge amount of time, but a fair amount of time socializing this before signing it. We didn't want to spring it on the partnership in particular. So that once it was signed, it was not a surprise to anybody. And I think the general reaction for those that weren't part of the socialization earlier was that it made sense. When I saw the question, though, there is, and Richard, I think there's an interesting question around the reaction of the city, because I was trying to think back 3 years ago, and some now, around the city reaction, and I don't know that it didn't make the front page of the FT that people were starting to sign the Mindful Business Charter. It has gotten some press for sure, and you just look at the long list of signatories to date. But there was no negative reaction. No one got a phone call from a stroppy PE house saying, how could you possibly treat your people nicely? That wasn't the reaction. But it tended to get picked up more in the context of the legal press rather than the financial press as such. But that may be I may have the wrong perspective on it. Richard, what's your sense around how the market has reacted to it? Because you've analyzed that too.
Yeah, so I think it's a good question, and I think I think there's not been any negativity in the sense of this is a bad idea. I think what there has been is a few kind of eyebrows raised saying, yeah, I believe that when I see it, because hey, we still have these stories about junior lawyers or even senior lawyers working 100-hour weeks or whatever it might be, and all sorts of issues like that. And so there's some skepticism there, but I think that is just reflective of the fact that we all know there is a long way to go here. We didn't change the world by signing a charter. What we did when we signed the charter was we said we will try and be part of the change that will change the world, but it will take some time. We had some good. There was an article in the Sunday Times a couple of weekends ago, so that was a nice bit of coverage. But it does tend to be more in the legal press, certainly, and obviously, we're talking today in the context of the legal profession, and that is where the charter began. But it's the signatories are from a much broader cross-section of industry, so it's not just about lawyers, but obviously we're talking about lawyers today. A question to us all, I think, and then which I'll answer first, and then I'll sort of put it out to you. So, examples of things that have happened that we think are great examples. So I'm going to give you an example, which is a kind of on a macro level. So there used to be, and I'm sure the same happens in other parts of the world, that there used to be a thing within the transactional teams in London law firms that said, if I'm working on a transaction against Julie, then by about kind of Thursday lunchtime, I'll start holding stuff back. And then at about 5 o'clock on a Friday, I will dump as much as I possibly can on Julie. The Friday 5 o'clock dump, it was known as. And then people realize that's not very respectful and it's not very helpful. And so people have stopped doing it. Now, that's a great story, of course, but I also know that we are all quite prone to getting to Friday and thinking, I really want to get my stuff done. I really want to get that stuff off my desk, out of my inbox, so then I can kind of relax on a Friday evening and know that I've done. And of course, that's great. But if I get it out of my inbox, it's going into somebody else's. And so there's a little bit about the charter that says be more mindful about that. Examples from anybody else that spring to mind?
I've got one about how we plan meetings. We had a senior person who was going through quite a lot of difficulties health-wise, and the people that she was working with, they had regular meetings, but they knew that she was going through these problems, and she needed a certain period of time during a working day that she was unavailable. But what they did was they would organize meetings, regular meetings, which she was involved in, right up against the time when she had to be away. And so there's always this, I've got to leave, I've got to go. And then when the charter came in, the person who was kind of running those meetings sort of realized, it was like a light bulb moment. Oh, hang on a second, I'm putting this person under unnecessary pressure. I mean, if we just shifted it half an hour, is it going to cause a problem for other people? No. But is it going to make a massive difference to her? Yes. And what later transpired was that she was on the verge of leaving us because this was just causing too much for her, and it was completely avoidable. And so what it did was it just raised awareness of other people's situations. But it's most of this is staring at you in the face. But it's really a simple thing like that. And she's a really valuable member of our team. But she could have left over something like as what in the face of it is as innocuous as that, but actually it was a big deal. And so, yeah, so that was a really, really positive move for us.
Thanks, Jonathan. Anyone else? Judy, you're on mute.
So Barclays had several initiatives simultaneous with the Mindful Business Charter. We have the values that we are rated on, just like Adam said, then when people get their performance evaluations at Baker and McKenzie, they're rated on the 4 pillars. Barclays is rated on what we do and how we do it, and the how is our compliance with Barclays values, one of which is respect. Something else that came out is we've been talking a lot about different people's working styles, and some senior leaders within legal a few years ago started coming out with individual sort of users manuals. I don't know if people have heard. Sometimes people come out with this is my user manual. This is how to work best with me, and these are what my non-negotiables are. So several senior leaders put out what their non-negotiables are, and everyone had something different. And really what it meant is, if you want to get the best quality of work out of me, you want me to be most responsive to your questions, this is how you approach me, right? Some wanted their football games, never interrupt me during such and such football games, right? Some it was time with their families, some it was, right? Everyone had something different. And I think that also opens up to more human, more creative, and more productive relationships. I think that it changes the workplace, and it really adds, Jonathan just talked about retention. I think it's a huge retention piece. When people can bring their full selves to work, and it's a huge plug and a huge retention value out of that.
Thanks, Judy. And whilst we've got you and perhaps Lashante as well on this, are there specific things that you at Barclays have done to enable, to empower outside lawyers to challenge you?
Right. So I saw that question. We don't have a slide deck or an orientation to our external counsel to say, feel free to speak your mind and tell us about your personal non-negotiables. In part, that's because I think, and maybe that happens in our relationship meetings. We only work with a small set of 30-something firms. So I think all of our firms have already been introduced to the Mindful Business Charter. also, I think it happens there's so much communication within Barclays about respect that we police each other. So I've had the experience of having a colleague of mine be overly demanding to our external counsel, sending them something in the morning and asking for a detailed, thoughtful, response on regulatory issues by the afternoon. And so I picked up the phone to the partner and said, I know this is unreasonable. So let's talk about what's reasonable, right? So I think it happens more informally than formally, and it's a matter of a culture shift. And I think, being more human again and having our external counsel feel that they can be themselves.
Thank you, Julie. Lashante, would you add anything to that?
Only that, sometimes when we are engaging with our external counsel, we will have conversations with them and let them know, like, hey, we'll make sure that we say that, you were a good partner with us, that we received the deadlines directly from you, basically we gave you a deadline and you met the deadline. And we do filter that back so that when it's time for our panel review, that we can actually say this was a good working partner with us. So that does weigh in on who we do utilize for our external counsel.
No, thank you. And certainly that, and as Jill has put in, Jill Samer from Barclays has put in the chat, it is very much part of your panel review process. I'm conscious of time. This is Mindful Business Charter, so we need to be mindful of time. I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm sure that if any of you have got questions you haven't asked for any of our panel members, they'd be delighted to hear from you, and so would I. What I want to do is to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists, first of all, for being part of today and sharing their insights and wisdom. And I also want to say thank you to you all in terms of attending. I hope it's been useful. If you're interested, if you want to find out more, website, email me, go away, have a think, talk internally, talk to each other. We've got some US law firms and US entities that are involved. We'd love to have more. And the more we do, the more change we can create. So if there's people out, if you're interested, let's work out the way in which we can all together be the change and not the status quo. I just wanted to finish with a little story. So I mentioned that I was ill some time ago, so 2011, and I spent some time in psychiatric hospital. And we had a group therapy session one day where there were about 20 of us in the room, and the group therapist said, I'd like you all to stand up in the middle of the room. So we all stood up in the middle of the room. She said, with your right hand, can you touch the right shoulder of somebody that you feel quite connected with today? So I did that. We all did that. She said, now with your left hand, touch the left shoulder of somebody that you think you can help today. So we all did that. And then she said, with your right foot, can you touch the right foot of somebody who you think can help you today? So I'm now standing a little bit like these characters from Twister, with on my sort of tiptoes of my left foot, trying desperately to balance and not to fall over and feeling very uncomfortable. And the therapist says, hold your positions. And very slowly she walks around and she comes to me and she says, Richard, are you comfortable there? And I said, no. She said, do you often feel like this? And I said, yes, I'm a lawyer. She said, can you look at everybody else? And everyone else was standing quite comfortably. She said, can you ask that person to move? Just get them to shift a little bit this way. And oh my goodness, it made all the difference. And that, I think, is what is at the heart of the Charter, that says we have got the permission to ask each other to move, and we can be brave when we do that. So with that, I'm going to say thank you hugely to Anne and the team for giving us an opportunity as part of this week to talk to you. Thank you again to Julie, to Lashante, to Jonathan and Adam. But thank you, all of you, for your time. And hopefully, I look forward to hearing from you. But thank you very much indeed.
Whoops. Thanks so much. This was just a fantastic panel. I learned so much. I'm hoping that it sparks a lot more conversations here in the US and in interest in the Charter. And this is just the first session for today. We have another session in a few hours that I wanted to make sure everyone knows about. That's a panel talking about success factors for firms and other organizations that are building well-being programs. We also have another webinar tomorrow and Friday, and also this is our website. So the after party is webinars, but it's also a lot of resources, downloadable tools. So check out the website for more information about building well-being in the legal profession. Thanks so much to the panel. Thanks so much to Richard, and thanks to everyone who joined today. Have a great day.